Hello, BookTube. As you've seen on this channel, endlessly, I get lots and lots of books in the mail, and most of those books are from larger outfits, the major publishers, and also lots and lots of the major second tier publishers, and I love them, and I love talking about them, and I love reviewing a lot of them, and also recommending them to you. But it occurred to me the other day that I also read a lot of indie books. If by indie we use the term loosely to mean books that are either self-published or by very, very small publishers. I read a lot of those as well. A lot of those I read in the line of duty. I review a lot of them for Kirkus Reviews. But also a lot of them I read for pleasure. Just to try to keep a thumb on the pulse of what is an absolutely enormous publishing arena. Far too big to do anything more than keep a thumb on the pulse of. I could easily sink all of my reading into the world of indie book publishing. And the world of indie book publishing, of course, in the last 10 years has changed enormously. It's gotten better. Much, much better. And much more varied. As editing packages, publishing software, publishing incentives, publishing avenues of all kinds have only proliferated in the last 10 years. It's amazing stuff. I have been aware for a long time that great work is being published in these venues, and I sometimes get the nagging feeling that I just don't talk about them enough on this channel, mainly because so much of my attention is commandeered by all of the big stuff that I get. So in this video, I want to recommend 3 indie books. Again, using that term loosely, I want to recommend 3 indie books to you. 3 indie books that I have read relatively recently that I have really, really, really liked. And one of them is not a new book. And we saw it on this channel. I actually opened it in the mail. I had no idea that it was coming, and no idea what to make of it until I read it. I want to start with that one. It's Fool's Errand by Scott Horton. And we saw it on this channel. I got a paperback signed by the author, and it's about, the subtitle is Time to End the War in Afghanistan. The book is from 2017, and I could tell even when I glanced at it when I first got it on camera that it's blistered with notes. There are footnotes. A huge amount of every page is footnotes. The author very carefully and very exhaustively documents every claim that he makes, and the book is a very good, functional, moment-by-moment history of how the war in Afghanistan started. But it's more than that. It's an absolutely scathing indictment of that war from the very beginning. From its ideological underpinnings, from the willful and unintentional misunderstandings that allowed lawmakers to push through this whole thing, all the way to the present day. Every fluctuation in that war, all the twists and turns of its fortunes, are written. It's such it's an exhaustively researched book, but it is very pointed. It's very energetic prose, very angry prose, and rightfully so. I loved it, absolutely loved it. It immediately went to the top of one of my lists of a book on the terror wars. These things that were launched by George W. Bush as globe-straddling aggressions against ideologies. In other words, wars that cannot, by definition, ever end. It immediately went on my shelf of keepers on that subject. I have been unfortunate enough to see a number of American military adventures, much like this one, the most infamous of all being Vietnam. And this is an immediate classic. Even if you disagree with the author, and you will, on some points you very much will, it's still invaluable reading. So I will put a picture right up here. No, I won't. Just kidding. No, YouTube's perfectly happy to make money off the revenue, off the traffic to my videos, my thousands of videos, but they aren't willing to increase their usability, even enough to allow a non-tech savvy old coot to put pictures in his videos. No, not going to do that. Anywho, I want to recommend Fool's Errand, even though it's not new. It's 2017, but the story's only gotten worse, and the story's not going anywhere. So if you're interested in the subject of America in Afghanistan, or the terror wars in general, and also a fairly stern indictment of the Obama administration, give this a read, absolutely. And the reason that I'm happy to recommend it is because of the nature of these 3 books, I'm not sure that you would see it otherwise. Right? That is the one Achilles heel, the one remaining Achilles heel of the indie book publishing industry, is advertising and distribution. If you got a book published by, who have I got here? Simon & Schuster. If you have a book published by Simon & Schuster, they will at least nominally pour money into getting the word out on your book, especially if you're one of their lead titles. Then you'll have full color ads in places where book people's eyes will go. You'll have review space. You'll have display space in bookstores, which is bought and paid for. If you're an indie bookseller, that won't be true. You're largely forging methods of spreading the word on your own, and it's entirely up to you. Now, mainstream publishing has been losing money. They have been getting stingier and stingier, so mainstream publishing will often, to a shocking extent, say that to an author. They'll say, well, yeah, we've set up these 3 potential readings for you. You're in Massachusetts. The readings are in Washington, D.C. and Pennsylvania. Let us know if you can go. Not we will send you there. We have a potential reading set up. You want to bring your own books for sale, and you also want to drive or fly there yourself. That sort of thing is more and more common, which would have been unthinkable a few decades ago. But even so, even with that belt tightening in mainstream publishing, indie publishers still have to do all of that work themselves, far more of it, usually. So another reason for recommending Fool's Errand by Scott Horton is to make sure you know about it. I will list these books down below. But that is one of 2 nonfiction books on the list here, and that's the only one that's historical, I promise. It's been my experience that indie history writing, serious footnoted indie history writing, is still lagging behind the other indie writing in other genres, and that's understandable, because that sort of thing usually takes an infrastructure. It's an enormous amount of work to do that. Oftentimes you have to travel. Oftentimes you have to go to archives. And if you're an indie book author and you don't have the support of Harvard University Press or Princeton University Press or whatever, and you have a full-time job and a family, you largely aren't going to be able to do that. I have noticed when it comes to nonfiction that indie authors tend to work around that. They have to be more creative. They have to be much more like their 18th century counterparts than authors have been with major publishers in the last 100 years. And Scott Horton does a great job of it. You won't feel the lack of any kind of research like this. It's a wonderful book. The next one I want to recommend is also nonfiction, and it's by a YouTuber. It's by one of our own. It's On Writing and Worldbuilding, Volume 1. And the author is Tim Hickson, who hosts a YouTube channel called Hello Future Me. And that YouTube channel has been him enthusing about various fantasy. He's a big Last Airbender fan. He's Game of Thrones videos have been doing fantastic, where he carefully analyzes the writing and directorial decisions in the last season of Game of Thrones. His Lord of the Rings videos, I think, are really good. So I was a fan of his channel before he decided to write a book. And his book is in some ways a takeoff from his channel. His channel has also included copious amounts of videos on writing, on advice, pointers, strictures, that sort of thing for writing. And a large amount of that material has been reworked and repurposed in this book, and there's a lot more along those lines. And it largely deals with, as you can tell from world building, it largely deals with fantasy and science fiction. I mean, a lot of the principles that are outlined in this book will apply to any kind of writing, to any kind of consistent writing. But the emphasis is on something like Tolkien's Middle-earth, something like that, where you're building a world, where you're building a magic system, soft or hard. His writing on magic systems is really, really good. When you're incorporating a belief system, a religion, things like that. If you're a writer and you are working on a manuscript, or you're dreaming about doing that, or you have always wanted to write a fantasy novel or a science fiction novel, a lot of the advice in this book is going to be very useful to you. And Tim Hickson understands perfectly well. I want to hasten to say this. He understands perfectly well the sort of Achilles heel of prescriptive writing guides, which is, you're laying out a list of rules and regulations. You're laying out a list of parameters. But of course, that's just to help you get started. right? These are not laws. You can break them. If you can make your work by flouting these rules, I think he would be the first in line to say, well, go ahead, and then to watch carefully for the end results. The end result is all that matters. But I have found with beginning writers, and even sometimes with writers who aren't beginners, that having these kinds of things to think about and sort of chew over in your mind can be enormously helpful. And a lot of books that present frameworks and principles like this do it in a kind of off-putting way. You don't really want to work it around in your mind because the author has already made you feel like an idiot. And this book doesn't do that at all. This is it's on writing and world building, but what it really is just page after page after page of incredible food for thought for someone who wants to write or maybe improve your writing game. This book, even this volume 1, I have no idea what volumes 2 or 3 or 4 will be, but even volume 1, I'm pretty sure you will find things in here that just put under a spotlight weaknesses in your own writing that have always bothered you, and maybe give you a way around them, maybe give you a new way to think about them that will allow you to stop doing those things, or at least to understand why you're doing them. He is wise. Tim Hickson is young. He is very young. He's also, I don't know if this will be a selling point to some of you, probably it will be, he's also a cat fancier, an unapologetic cat fancier. But even though he's young and also fond of Satan and his minions, he still has an amazing clarity of thought about some processes of writing. You're going to learn a lot from this book, no matter how much you know about writing, even if the basics that he lays out are things you're already familiar with. Most of them I was already familiar with, a lot of the basics and a lot of the examples. And in a case like someone like me, I've read probably 150 times as many things as he has. So I have more examples in mind, including naturally when he lays out some sort of rule or precept. 1,000 examples come to mind that don't follow that break that precept. But the point is that he's not doctrinaire about this. He's not claiming that he's read it all. He's not claiming that he knows it all. Instead, these are things for you to think about. These are frameworks that he has put up and lays out a very carefully thought out rationale for why they are so. Now, if you can come up with a rationale for why they aren't so, or if your mind immediately suggests books that flout those ideas and still work, well, that's still got you thinking. That's still got you thinking in a very active way. Now, I always stress on this channel that you should be writing. All readers should write. All people should write. And to that end, guidebooks, prescriptive or otherwise, are often very helpful. So I wanted to recommend this one because it is very, very good. And the last one I'm going to do, you thought I will do fiction, because I could do fiction, a video like this for half an hour every day on fiction. Fiction, of course, drastically outnumbers indie nonfiction. But I'm gonna pick just one, and I'm late to the party. This author has a huge following of loyal fans, and I didn't know she existed. That is the whole thing about indie writing, especially indie fiction, is that authors can build up a whole community of people that love them and know everything they do and eagerly wait for the new book. And because they are operating below the radar of the mainstream publishing publicity apparatus, you can still not know about them, even though they have this huge enthusiastic community, and this is definitely a case of that. The author's name is Angel Martinez, and her new book is called The Mage on the Hill. It is the first book in a series called The Web of Arcana. But this author has apparently done lots of other books. When I read The Mage on the Hill without knowing anything about her, and without looking up anything about her. But then when I thought about making this video, I, of course, looked her up, and she has an enormous and ardent following of fans as an indie writer. I haven't read any of her other books. Now I kind of want to. But the Mage on the Hill starts with the story of a young boy named Toby, who's at an institution that is trying to help him because this is a world in which there are magic users, and most of the magic users fall into recognizable categories and therefore can be helped to channel their magic, because there are institutions, there are councils and schools designed for that type of magic. But every once in a while you get an unplaceable. Every once in a while you get someone whose magic is not only not in one of those schools, but doesn't seem to be under the person's control. These people are, of course, dangerous. Very dangerous. This story takes place largely in Pittsburgh. And the young man in question, Toby, is at a place where they have tried everything they can and they simply cannot help him. He is an unplaceable in a way that is uncategorizable and also dangerous. And they don't want him to lose control of his magic and blow open huge parts of Pittsburgh, devastate huge parts of the city. I myself think that virtually any accident along those lines would be an improvement. But no, I'm just a little friendly jab at Philadelphia. The thing that becomes obvious in the early pages of Mage on the Hill is that when an academy tells a young unplaceable, well, I'm sorry, we can't really help you, they're not planning on patting you on the head and leaving you. You are too dangerous. You are a bomb waiting to go off. No, instead, the alternative is that they will send you to a hospice where you will be drugged to the gills so that your power can't go out of control and taken off life support. They'll stop giving you food and water. You'll slowly die. It's euthanasia. And Toby is disinclined to that alternative. He doesn't want to just meekly go off and die. And it turns out that there is a sort of a rogue mage he's an outcast now because a mistake of his years ago actually did cause a catastrophe in Pittsburgh. And although, he wasn't directly responsible, he holds himself responsible. His name is Darius Valstad, and he has secluded himself from society, and Toby finds him. Finds him online with an online search. Funny enough, he doesn't do it by magic. He searches for him online the way anybody would, finds him, and throws himself at Darius's mercy. If you don't help me, I'm going to die. Either an institution is going to euthanize me, or my own gift is going to kill me. One way or another, I need help. And you are my only hope. You're the only person left I can turn to. And what follows from that is a well-worked-out magic system. This is, I think, what you would call urban fantasy. Because it's not in the thatched hut and well-met stranger agrarian fantasy land of Tolkien. It's set in cities, recognizable places where normal muggles are still going about their business. But it's not just that the magic system is well worked out. It's very enjoyable, and it gets more so as the book goes on. It starts out very simple, but then it gets increasingly and very pleasingly complex. But the other aspect of the book, and for me the aspect that was much more enjoyable, is the growing friendship between Toby and Darius, between these two people. One of whom, Toby, his life is in danger, and he's very alarmed by this thing inside him that he can't control. But he's also just sort of irrepressible. He's kind of a funny kid. And that has been missing. All human contact has been missing from Darius's life. And as is true in most cases, he is unaware of how badly he has missed it. And I was pleased by the fact that Angel Martinez doesn't stint either one of those sides for the other. I have read books like this where the author did, and it doesn't happen in this book. Instead, they are perfectly balanced. Both will keep you reading. So I really, really liked it. Also, the thing, I might as well admit this when it comes to indie books, the thing that got my attention in the first place, the very first place, before I read any samples or anything like that, was the wonderful cover design. So, and the same thing is true of On Writing and Worldbuilding. In that case, I knew about this author already, but he found a really good artist for his cover. And, that's a thing to stress here is for you aspiring indie writers, don't skimp on your cover. That's as simple as that. Pay top dollar for your editing and pay top dollar for your cover. Just do it. Those are the out-of-pocket expenses that you absolutely can't stint on if you want to attract the attention of a wandering reader who doesn't have the advantage of having your book stacked 5 deep on a Barnes & Noble table. You have to do that. Your publisher is not going... You are your publisher. You have to do all of that. And Angel Martinez picked a winner with this cover. It's very eye-catching. And, that would have gotten me to page 1 or 2 anyway. But the rest of the book, I just couldn't stop reading. I loved it. So I wanted to recommend it to you, especially since it's number 1 in the series. So I will... That's an indie trio that I want to recommend to you. Stuff that isn't quite the Simon & Schuster, the St. Martin's, the Harvard University Press shuffle that we get on this channel. And I will list all of these books below, and I will also leave, if I remember, I will leave a link. Ordinarily, it wouldn't matter. You can find Simon & Schuster as well as I can. But if I remember, I will leave a link to these books and to their authors so that you can go and explore. Because this isn't the same thing as me holding up the latest Churchill biography from Viking Press and saying, yeah, this was really good. It was a little soft on the Suez Crisis, but otherwise fine. This isn't like that at all. This is authors who aren't indulging in a middleman. They're going straight to you. So if you like the sound of these things, or if you follow the links that I'll lead and you go to the books and you like the look of them or the sample of them, buy them. Don't just put them on a TBR. Buy them. These authors actually need you, whereas gigantic multinational conglomerations owned by Bertelsmann don't particularly need you. so there you go. That's an extra bit of urgency. If these things appeal to you, then buy them. Don't just think about it, because these authors need your money. And also, we've all been there, especially you aspiring authors out there. You've all been there. It's not just that they would like the sale. It's also that the more people find their books, the acknowledgement means a lot. That's another thing that indie authors don't get. They don't get industry acknowledgement. There's still, even after all this time, a bit of stigma attached to self-publishing. Even if your product is perfect, even if your product is professional in every way, there's still a bit of stigma to it. It's absolutely ridiculous. That wall is gone. The days of so-called vanity press publishing, those days are gone. They're permanently gone. So that stigma ought to have gone with them. Now there's just books all across the spectrum by all kinds of writers. And the metric for judging those books has never changed. It doesn't matter whether it's St. Martin's or whether it's Scott Horton publishing books on his own. The metric hasn't changed. It's when you read the book, is it any good? So there, I wanted to point out 3 that are really good for you. So I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.